Hi everybody, my name is Holly. Thank you for joining me for today's yoga. I was sent a request to do a sequence for climbers, so today we're going to be focusing on the upper body, so building strength and releasing any tension, but we're also going to bring some focus to our wrists, our feet and ankles, bit of lower body and core. So we're going to start today sitting on our feet. So for some people this can be really uncomfortable. This is where you can use a block to sit on so that you can bring any tension out of the knees and the ankles. And just resting our hands on our lap, letting our shoulders drop down away from the ears. And just taking a moment here to settle on the mat. Slowing down the breath. Inhaling and exhaling through the nose. And trying to match the length of our inhales and exhales. On our next exhale, we're going to drop our right ear down to our right shoulder. You might want to play a bit with the chin position to feel a stretch that feels good for you down the left side of the neck. Inhale to come back through to center. Exhale, drop the left ear down to the left shoulder, this time stretching into the right side. Inhale to come back through to center. On our next exhale, we're dropping our chin down to the chest. And then interlacing the fingers and maybe resting our hands on the back of the head to increase the stretch. If this feels uncomfortable, just skip it. So we're taking that stretch into the upper back. And then releasing from here. We're going to come up onto our knees, we're going to tuck our toes and then sit in on the heels. If this is really uncomfortable, then just sit on the tops of the feet, but it's good to stretch into the ankles and down the backs of the soles of the feet. Interlacing those fingers, inhale, pushing those palms up towards the ceiling, lifting up out the waist. On our next exhale, we're going to bring our left arm in front of us, right arm behind us, keeping those hips facing forward, just opening into the upper back. Inhale back through to center, both arms up, exhaling, bringing the right arm forward, left arm behind us. Inhaling to come back through to center, and then releasing, coming back down onto the tops of the feet. Coming into cactus arm, so our elbows are in line with the shoulders. Inhale to push the chest forward, bringing those shoulder blades together behind us. Exhaling, round and contract, bringing the forearms together. And then from here, we're going to bring the left forearm underneath the right, left elbow underneath the right elbow. Maybe bind in once, so bringing the backs of the hands together, or if you can, bind twice, bring the palms together. This is our eagle arms. If you can do this position, inhale to lift the elbows, exhale to drop the shoulders. If this is too much, release and just hold on to opposite shoulders. On our next inhale, we're going to come back into our cactus arms and push the chest forward, bringing our elbows behind us. Exhaling to round and contract, bringing those forearms together. This time the opposite elbow goes underneath, bringing the backs of the hands together, or the palms of the hands together, or holding on to opposite shoulders. We're just opening up into the upper back in between the shoulder blades. And exhaling to release and coming into our tabletop pose. So wrists underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips with a flat back. So we're going to warm up the wrists. We're going to start to walk our fingertips out to the sides until they're pointing to the long edge of the mat. And then you might want to sway gently from side to side, noticing how this feels in the wrists. If you can start to walk your fingers all the way around so they're pointing towards your knees. Maybe you want to take the hips back a bit further to take the stretch a little deeper. And then releasing those wrists and then bringing the backs of the hands onto the mat with those fingertips pointing towards us. Again, if you want to, you can start to sink the hips back and taking that stretch into the forearms. And then exhaling to release, bringing the palms of the hands back down on the mat. We're going to walk our hands forward, bringing our chest down on towards the mat. Hips over the knees, we're in our puppy pose. Maybe resting the forehead down, or if it feels okay in the neck, you can bring your chin down onto the mat. Feeling that stretch into the chest and into the shoulders, into the upper back. If you want to, you can bring your palms into prayer position and then bring your thumbs to the back of the neck, taking that stretch into the triceps and down the backs of the arms. And then exhaling to release from here and start to walk our fingertips in towards you, lifting the chest, coming back into our tabletop pose. And we'll move into our first downward facing dog. So walking our hands slightly in front of the shoulders. They are shoulder width distance apart. Our feet are hip width distance apart. Tuck the toes. On our next exhale, send that tailbone high into our downward facing dog. So if you're tight down the back of the legs, you might want to keep a bend in the knees. You might want to pedal out the feet. What we're looking for is a nice flat back, finding length in the spine and pushing down through those fingertips. And then bringing some stillness into the legs. On our next inhale, we're going to ripple forward, taking the weight over the wrist, coming into our high plank pose. Core is engaged. Exhaling, downward facing dog. Inhale, rippling forward into plank. Exhale to down dog. 2 more times. Inhale to plank. Exhale, down dog. Final time. Inhale into plank. Exhaling, down dog. On our next inhale, bend into both knees, gaze towards the top of the mat and walking our feet up towards our hands, coming into our ragdoll fold. So our feet are hip width distance apart, holding onto opposite elbows with the hands, letting that crown of the head hang heavy and keeping a bend in the knees. Releasing all the way down the back of the body. You might want to sway gently from side to side, releasing the lower back. And then releasing our fingertips down to the mat. We're slowly going to roll all the way up the spine, so pressing into the feet, keeping a bend in the knees and rolling ourselves up to stand, out to Tadasana pose. Palms of the hands facing forward, crown of the head is lifted. And from here, we'll move into our first sequence. We're going to start with a balance pose. So if you're working on carpet, it's harder to balance. So rooting down through both feet and taking a slight bend into both knees. We're going to bring our left knee up and over the right knee. So pointing those toes down to the mat for balance, or if you can double wrap, we're bringing our left toes around the back of the right leg. And then bringing our arms out to shoulder height, we're going to bend into the elbows and we're going to take our left elbow underneath the right elbow. So binding once or twice, this is our eagle pose. So maybe sink in those hips, but keep the chest lifted and find length in the spine. And don't worry if you're wobbling, it's completely normal. Remember, you can use a wall for balance if you need to. Hugging those thighs in towards each other, hugging those arms together. On our next inhale, straightening into the legs, release. We're going to step our left foot behind us, heel is down and toes off on 45-degree angle. Bending into this right knee, our hips and chest face forward, arms lift up. Bringing those palms together into prayer position and taking our gaze up towards the hands. This is our warrior one. If your shoulders are really tight, you can separate the palms so they are shoulder width distance apart. And if your balance is a bit off, just keep your gaze forward instead of up towards the hands. And then releasing from here. On our next inhale, we're going to step forward to the top of the mat. So we'll do that balance sequence on the opposite side. So rooting down through both feet, slight bend in the knees. This time we lift the right knee up and over the left. So pointing those toes down or double wrapping. Bring our arms out shoulder height. This time right elbow goes underneath left elbow by binding once or twice. And try and focus on something that isn't going to move to help you feel balanced. There is that option to hold on to the shoulders instead of doing the eagle arms. I should have said that the first time round, I apologise. On our next inhale, we'll release from here, so straightening into the legs, releasing the arms, stepping that right foot back, heel is down, toes off on a 45-degree angle, bending into this left knee, hips and chest face forward, raising those arms up, palms together, Gazing up to the hands into our warrior one. Pressing down evenly through both feet. On our next inhale, we will step that back foot to the top of the mat and we'll start to flow. Inhale, circling our arms up towards the ceiling, palms meet overhead. Exhale, bring those hands out wide, diving down over the body into a forward fold. Inhale into our half lip flat back, so palms can come onto shins or fingertips can stay on the mat, reaching that crown of the head away from the tailbone. Exhaling, coming back into our fold, planting those palms, stepping back into plank pose. From here, we're going to bend at the elbows and lower all the way down to the mat. Inhaling into our cobra. Exhaling as we lower, making our way into downward facing dog. And from here, we're going to inhale forward into plank. And we're going to make sure the right wrist is directly into the right shoulder. We're going to roll to the outside edge of the right foot, stacking the left on top and coming into our high side plank. Gazes up to those left fingertips. There's always an option to bring that right knee down, so you can come into supported side plank. You don't have to stack the feet, you can have one on top of the other. Lift those hips and make sure those hips are facing the long edge of the mat, so you're not rolling those hips open towards the ceiling. On our next exhale, release that left hand down, coming back into plank pose. We'll go straight to the opposite side, so coming to the outside edge of the left foot, rolling open into our side plank on the left. Stacking those hips. On our next exhale, release that right hand down back into our plank and then coming onto the elbow. So we're in our elbow plank. And then start to walk those feet in. We're coming into dolphin. So taking our weight over the shoulders, pressing down through the palms and the forearms. You can keep a bend in those knees and your heels will probably be lifted. So we're sending that tailbone high. Crown of the head is lifted off the mat. If you want to take some of the weight out to the upper back, you can interlace the fingers to come into a tripod, and it takes a bit of a weight into the forearms. On our next exhale, we're going to release those knees down and coming back into our tabletop pose, taking our feet back into plank. We'll move through a vinyasa, exhaling to bend at the elbows, lower all the way down. Inhaling into cobra, exhaling to lower, making our way into downward facing dog. And then releasing those knees down to the mat, bringing our feet off to one side, and then bringing our sitting bones down, and then shuffling forward so we've got more room behind us. Make sure those soles of the feet are on the mat, keeping a bend in the knees, and bringing our hands slightly behind the sitting bones. The fingertips can be facing towards you, or you can keep those fingertips facing away from you. On our next inhale, we're going to lift the hips coming into our reverse table. If your shoulders are tight, it might be hard to lift the hips. On our next exhale, we're going to do a little bit of core work. So we're going to lower those hips down, we're going to hover them, we're going to go past the wrists and hover them. So engage that core. On our next inhale, bend into the knees, lift the hips, reverse tabletop. Exhale, lower the hips, bring them behind the wrists, keep them lifted. One more time, inhaling to lift. Exhaling to bring those hips behind the wrists. And then exhaling to lower those hips down. Inhale to lift and lengthen. On an exhale, we're going to hinge from the hips and coming into a forward fold. So bringing those hands wherever is comfortable, so you can bring them around the heels, peace fingers around the toes, or you can rest on the shins. Reaching that crown of the head towards the toes. And you can keep a slight bend in those knees if your hamstrings are feeling tight. On our next inhale, release and lift the chest. And we're going to bend into the knees and keeping our heels on the mat. Keep the chest lifted, our knees are close in towards the chest. We're going to hold on to the backs of the thighs and we're going to start to roll onto our sitting bones until we feel stable enough to maybe lift those feet off the mat. We're going to make our way into half boat pose. We're going to start to lift our shins up in line with the knees, push into the heels, bring those toes back towards you. So already feeling those hip flexors engage here, and then bring our arms out to shoulder height. Keeping those shoulders down away from the ears. If anyone wants to go deeper, you can bring your arms up overhead and you can straighten into those legs. Keep the chest lifted. We're not here for long. Exhaling, lowering those feet down. Soles of the feet on the mat. Making sure you've got enough room behind you. Bringing our arms out of shoulder height. We're slowly going to roll all the way down until we bring our shoulder blades down onto the mat, back of the head on the mat. And then bringing our arms out of shoulder height, or cactus those arms if you don't have the room. Pressing into the feet, lifting the hips slightly and shift them over to the right. And then bringing your knees in towards the chest. On our next exhale, we're going to take a twist, drop those knees down to the left. So our gaze comes over to the right, or you can keep that gaze up towards the ceiling, keeping that right shoulder down. If your knees don't quite come to the floor, you can make a fist with your left hand and place it underneath that left knee, or you can rest your left hand on top of the right knee and just weight it down. On our next inhale, engage the core. We're going to bring our knees back through to center, and then lowering those feet down, lifting those hips, shift them slightly over to the left, bring the knees back in towards the chest. On our next exhale, we'll drop our knees down to the right, gaze comes over to the left, or keep that gaze up towards the ceiling. And staying open in the chest and keeping that left shoulder down. Our next inhale, engage the core, bringing our knees back through to center, and then hugging our arms around the shins, and then gently rocking from side to side, massaging the low back. And then bringing our hands onto the backs of the thighs. We can rock ourselves up to sitting, or you can roll to one side and use your hands to support you to bring you into a seated position. We're going to come to cross-legged. Resting our hands in our lap, maybe closing the eyes or lowering the gaze, and relaxing the face and letting those shoulders drop down away from the ears. Having a quick scan through the body, checking how it's feeling. Do you feel a bit more open in the upper body? And then bringing our palms together at the heart, bowing forehead to fingertips. Give yourselves a little thank you for making time to get on the mat today. And thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.